will bring you the world's first 747.
It's the early 1970s, and you are flying on a brand new plane, the luxurious 747. You can't believe what you see in front of you. The large airplane is as large as a 5-story building. No, larger actually. The airline? Pan Am, or Pan American World Airways. That is how I believe people must have felt when the first 747 flight with Pan Am took place. Now let's talk more about Pan Am, the unofficial national airline of the US. Let's talk about it. Since the 1930s, Yuan tribe had coveted domestic routes for Pan Am. Through the late 1950s and early 60s, and in the mid-70s, there were talks of merging the airline with a domestic operator such as American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Trans World Airlines, or United Airlines. As rival airlines convinced Congress that Pan Am would use its political clout to monopolize US air routes, the CAB repeatedly denied the airline permission to operate in the US by growth or by merger with another airline. Pan Am remained an American carrier operating internationally routes only aside from Hawaii and Alaska. The last time Pan Am was permitted to merge with another airline prior to the deregulation of the US airline industry was in 1950 when it took over American Overseas Airlines from American Airlines. After deregulation in 1978, more US domestic airlines began competing with Pan Am internationally. To acquire domestic routes, Pan Am under President Sewell set its eyes on national airlines. Pan Am wound up in a bidding war with Frank Lorenzo's Texas International that boosted national stock price, but Pan Am was granted permission to buy national in 1980 in what was described as the coup of the decade. The acquisition of National Airlines for $437 million further burdened Pan Am's balance sheet, already under strain after financing the Boeing 747s ordered in the mid-1960s. This acquisition did little to improve Pan Am's competitive position in relation to nimbler, lower-cost competitors in a deregulated industry, as National's north-south route structure provided insufficient feed at Pan Am's transatlantic and trans-Pacific gateways in New York and Los Angeles. The airlines had incompatible fleets and corporate cultures. They didn't mix well, and the integration was poorly handled by Pan Am management, who presided over an increase in labor costs as a result of harmonizing National's pay scale with Pan Am's. Although revenues increased by 62% from 1979 to 1980, fuel costs from the merger increased by 157% during a weak economic climate. As 1980 progressed and the airline's financial situations worsened, Sewell began selling Pan Am's non-core assets. The first asset to be sold off was the airline's 50% interest in Falcon Jet Corporation, which happened in August. Later in November, Pan Am sold the Pan Am building to the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company for $400 million. In September of 1981, Pan Am sold off its Intercontinental Hotels chain. Before this transaction closed, Sewell was replaced by C. Edward Aker, Air Florida's founder and ex-president, as well as former Braniff International executive. The combined sale value of the Intercontinental chain and the Falcon Jet Corporation stake was $500 million. A lot of money. Not enough to save Pan Am, but a lot of money. Aker followed up the asset disposal program he had inherited from his predecessor with operational cutbacks. Most prominent among these was the discontinuation of the round-the-world service from October 31st, 1982, when Pan Am ceased flying between Delhi, Bangkok, and Hong Kong due to the sector's unprofitability. To provide additional seating capacity for its 1983 spring-summer season, the airline also acquired 3 passenger Boeing 747-200Bs from Flying Tigers, who took 4 of Pan Am's 747-100 freighters in return. So 3 planes for 4 planes. Seems fine. Despite Pan Am's precarious financial situation in summer 1984, Aker went ahead with an order for new Airbus models in wide-body and narrow-bodied aircraft, becoming the second American company to order Airbus aircraft after Eastern Airlines. In 1985, new A310-221s began replacing 727s on the internal German services, and the A300s flew in the Caribbean networks later that same year. From early 1986, additional new longer-range A310-222s replaced some of the 747s on the slimmed-down transatlantic network following ETAP certification approval by the FAA. Pan Am's decision not to take delivery of the A320s and to sell its delivery position to Braniff meant that the majority of its short-haul US domestic and European feeder routes and most of its German services continued to be flown with the obsolete 727s until the airline's demise. Not a good move. In September of 1984, Pan American World Airways created a holding company called Pan Am Corporation to assume ownership and control of the airline and the services division. Given the airline's dire state, in April of 1985, Aker sold Pan Am's entire Pacific division, which consisted of 25% of its entire route system and their major hub at Tokyo Narita, to United Airlines for $750 million. This sale also enabled Pan Am to address fleet and compatibility issues related to the earlier acquisition of National Airlines, as it included Pan Am's Pratt & Whitney JT90 powered 747 SPs, its Rolls-Royce RB211 powered L1011 500, and the General Electric CF6 powered DC10s inherited from National, which were transferred to United along with the Pacific routes. In the early 1980s, Pan Am contracted several regional airlines, those being Air Atlanta, Colgan Air, Emerald Air, Empire Airlines, Presidential Airways, and Republic Airlines, to operate feeder flights under the Pan Am Express branding. The acquisition of Pennsylvania-based commuter airline Ransom Airlines for $65 million was meant to address the issue of providing additional feed for Pan Am's mainline services at its hubs in New York, Los Angeles, and Miami in the United States, and in Berlin. In an attempt to gain a presence on the busy Washington to New York to Boston commuter air corridor, the Ransom acquisition was accompanied by the $100 million purchase of New York Air shuttle service between Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. This parallel move was intended to enable Pan Am to provide a high-frequency service for high-yield business travelers in direct competition with the long-established successful Eastern Airlines shuttle operations. I have, by the way, already made a video about New York Air. Warning, it's one of my first... It is my first video of this style of content. So it's not great. You can watch it if you want. The renamed Pan Am shuttle began operating out of LaGuardia Airport's refurbished historic Marine Air Terminal in October of 1986. However, it did not address the pressing issue of Pan Am's continuing to lack of a strong domestic feeder network. In 1987, Towers Financial Corporation, led by its CEO Stephen Hoffenberg and his consultant Jeffrey Epstein, unsuccessfully tried to take over Pan Am in a corporate raid with Towers Financial as their raiding vessel. Thomas G. Plaskett, a former American Airlines and Continental executive, replaced Aker as president in January of 1988. While a program to refurbish Pan Am aircraft and improve the company's on-time performance began showing positive results. On December 21st of 1988, the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 above Lockerbie, Scotland resulted in 270 fatalities, with a $300 million lawsuit filed by more than 100 families of the victims. The airlines subpoenaed records of 6 U.S. government agencies, included the CIA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the State Department. Though the records suggested that the U.S. government was aware of the warnings of a bombing and failed to pass the information to the airline, the families claimed that Pan Am was just attempting to shift the blame. Also, in December of 1988, the FAA fined Pan Am for 19 security failures out of the 236 that were detected among 29 airlines. In June of 1989, Plaskett presented Northwest Airlines with a $2.7 billion takeover bid that was backed by bankers Trust Morgan, Guaranty Trust, Citicorp, and Prudential Batchy, whatever those names are. The proposed merger was Pan Am's final attempt to create a strong domestic network to provide sufficient feed for the two remaining mainline hubs at New York, JFK, and Miami. It was also intended to help the airline regain its status as a global airline by re-establishing a sizable trans-Pacific presence. The merger was expected to result in an annual savings of $240 million. However, billionaire financier Al Chechi outbid Pan Am by presenting Northwest's directors with a superior proposal. And that's all. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.